Hey everyone, good morning. So for our vlog today, we will be talking about the new mini sheer buffer from Sonia G brushes. Yee, look at that. I was so excited for this release when it was announced by Sonia G because I love smaller brush heads because they just really help me to be detailed with my application process. But before we continue and talking about this brush, I would like to give a huge thank you to Sonia G and to Vitalish for sending this my way. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. You have no idea. I truly appreciate it. Alright, so today we'll be talking about the mini sheer buffer in detail. We will be doing some comparisons and of course a demo. So this is how the mini sheer buffer looks like under natural light, and I think looking at this under such lighting actually brings out the beauty of this brush, especially in the handle. You know, can you guys just see how beautiful the light gleams off of it? It's so pretty, and that's what I love about the Pro Handle series, and also the color that is used for the handle. And of course, we could still have the Sonia G stamping here on the front, and then we have the name stamped at the back, mini sheer buffer, and of course the Japan branding. And as you guys can see here, this has a black ferrule, and it is actually rounded with no crimp on it at all. Now the bristles are made of Chikuhodo goat hair and synthetic bristles. And if I just run my fingers through the bristles, you guys can see that this has a certain amount of airiness, which is great because at least this can give this brush certain buffing ability on the face. And as I am pouncing the brush head here on the palm of my hand, you guys can see that it gives you a certain directional kind of an approach wherein we can actually use this brush to build up product on the face. It's not that soft, but it's also not that hard, but it's just right. So the bristle tips here, it's actually very nice and silky, no prickling sensation at all. And I love the brush head here. It is rounded in design, and if you know me, I love rounded brush heads in my collection. Now for sure, the brush head size of the mini sheer buffer is smaller than the sheer buffer. And I think you guys can see it here. And this will actually give you a visual idea, especially if you're someone who doesn't have the sheer buffer in your collection. Now the bristles are both airy, but the sheer buffer actually has a much more softer core in comparison to the mini sheer buffer. Because when I'm really pressing it with the palm of my hands, I need to apply more pressure to actually really press it down into my palms or try to deform it, but it keeps its shape fantastically well, and that's what I love about the sheer buffer. Now the sheer buffer, of course, because the bristles are just longer, it's gonna be softer in comparison to the mini sheer buffer, so you don't really need to use a lot of pressure to actually use the brush head effectively. This is such a good brush. Okay, so both of these brush head almost have the same brush head design. Both of them are actually rounded in brush head designs, but they just differ in the way they bloom. Of course, the sheer buffer blooms wider at the tips in comparison to the mini sheer buffer. And if we press both brush heads together, you guys can see the core strength of each brush, and you can actually see that the sheer buffer is a tad softer in comparison to the mini sheer buffer. But they absolutely look fantastic together. I can't wait to try both of them. Alright, so now it's time for us to try and use the mini sheer buffer. I am so excited for this, but first I'm going to put on some foundation, and I'm going to be using my Armani Luminous Foundation, and I'm going to be using the sheer buffer first to apply product all over my face. Now by the way, I've already have my skincare down, I already have my brows, and everything that I'm going to be using today is going to be listed down on the description box. Okay, alright, so I have the Armani Luminous Silk Foundation here on my palette, and with the sheer buffer brush, I'm just going to load the product into the brush here, and I'm just going to buff this all over my face. Now the sheer buffer actually applies and blends out and shears out foundation quite nicely, especially liquid foundation. But I actually love using the sheer buffer even for cream foundation products because it just has a way of applying a very nice even amount of product on the face in a very sheer manner and no streaking at all whatsoever, and you actually apply it in no time, which is actually great. But when there are certain areas of the face wherein I would like to apply foundation in a much more, let's say, precise manner, There are times that I would actually, press the brush head of the sheer buffer and stamp in the product, in that area. So that's always usually on my nose or here in the under eyes. And that's why when Sonia released this, I was actually very excited for this, because I know that I can use a sheer buffer exactly for that kind of application, wherein if I just really need to apply more product in certain areas, like here on the sides of the nose, here in the under eyes. See that? See? Look how easy it is. And again, I'm able to apply the color in no time. I'm also actually able to build in the coverage that I need in that area. I love it. And especially if you're someone who's creative with your makeup application process. Example for me, when I want to do a very nice highlighted kind of a skin tone, I actually don't use concealer in the T-zone area or in the under eye area, but I actually like using a lighter shade of the foundation. For example, I have my Lisa Eldridge skin tint here, so this is a little bit lighter in tone than the Armani foundation here. So I'm just gonna use the mini sheer buffer now, and I'm just gonna use this to apply a little bit of some highlight here in my T-zone area and also here in my under eye area. And I love that we're actually able to apply a very nice sheer amount of product, and we're actually also able to blend it out quite nicely and precisely, I have to say. Love it. Again, you guys can see the movement that the brush head actually has. It really just helps to apply the product in a specific area that you want. Nice control. It's actually very feel safe. So even if you're someone who's just starting out your makeup journey or your foodie journey, I believe that this brush is a perfect brush to have in your collection. Okay, and just like that, I'm actually able to build up foundation. I'm also able to layer different types and tones of foundation just to really enhance my skin tone. I love it. I love this brush. So as I'm playing with the mini sheer buffer here, another brush just suddenly came into my head, and it was actually the Hakuhodo G5553 brush. So I've had this brush for quite a while, but I haven't used it in quite a while because my taste in the use of foundations has changed, and also the foundations these days are quite good, because the G5553 brush here, if you take a look at the bristle, it's actually quite erect in design, and this actually gives it a little bit of some prickling sensation on the face that I don't want. But I actually use this when I want to sheer out very heavy foundations, like those very creamy foundations, because this just really has the strength in the belly of this to actually really drag out and to sheer out those types of foundations. And of course, if we put the G5553 brush beside the mini sheer buffer, you actually see that it's actually shorter, and that's why it's denser, and that's why we also have this very strong core in this brush. But so far, I'm just loving on how the mini sheer buffer is actually feeling on my face and working on my face. Actually so fantastic. I love it. Alright, so now let's try and use this blush with a mini sheer buffer. So I already knew when I saw this that this is actually a perfect pairing, especially if you're someone who has a lot of this stick types of blushes, because again, the brush head here is actually quite small enough, and it fits quite nicely into these shapes of blushes. And for sure, look at that. Look on how easy it is to apply the blush, how specific it is, but also on how sheer. Amazing. I love that. I was not expecting that. But then again, this is a Sonia G brush, so it works so effortlessly. So effortlessly. I love it. Okay, look at that. Very nice and very sheer application. But you actually still really get a very nice specific application of product on the face. And with me, I always love applying blush at the highest points of my cheeks and buff it out. Great, fantastic. Okay, so now I have this Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm Powder flushed, and let's try how this blush will apply on the face using the mini sheer buffer. So I have it now here on my palette, and let me just load the brush with this. Not too much because these blush products from Danessa are actually very pigmented. And let me just tap it. Ooh, look how specific this brush can apply color. So I'm gonna remove the excess product here on the bristle, like really work it into a microfiber towel here, and love it. Look how this brush really buffs out the cream blush nicely and effectively, and also in a very sheer manner, but you still have the pigmentation of the blush. Okay, look at that. And if you're seeing some holes in your blush application, you can always go back and tap on a specific area to build more intensity and of course balance of pigment. I love that. And again, I'm gonna remove any excess color here on a microfiber towel, and then I'm gonna pick up, let's say, my Armani foundation here, load it on the brush, and use it to blend out the outer edges of the blush. So I'm actually seeing that the mini sheer buffer here is a very helpful brush, wherein it can really help you to build to the intensity that you want on the face, may it be with foundation or blush so far. Okay, I love it. Okay, so now let's try a liquid blush of sorts. Okay, so I have the Unreal blush from Hourglass. So this is in the color Vision, and I have a little bit of it here on my palette. And I'm just gonna use the mini sheer buffer now, and I'm really loading the brush head with the blush. And I'm just gonna apply this on top of the cream blush that I used earlier. And I'm actually seeing that the mini sheer buffer here is actually layering the two different types of blush formulas quite nicely. And as you guys can see here, we have a very nice even application of the Unreal blush from Hourglass on top of the cream blush that I used on this cheek. Very nice. No clumping of formulation. Very nice even tone, and also very sheer and very well blended. I love it. I love how this is working for us today. Fantastic. Look at that. So anyway, let me again buff out the color of the blush here on a microfiber towel. And this time I'm going to be getting my Lisa Aldridge skin tint, and this is what I'm going to use around the edges of the blush, just to blend it out. Okay, so I'm going to build more of the skin tint in this portion of my face. This can just really help to blend out the blush as well. Look how easy it is for me to apply more of this skin tint from Lisa, and it's also helping me to blend out with the edges. Actually quite lovely. I love how this brush is introducing itself to us today. Okay, so out of curiosity, I have my Chanel bronzer here, and I've already placed a little bit of it here on my palette. And I'm gonna be using the mini sheer buffer now, to add a bronzer kind of a situation on the face. Okay, and I'm just gonna pat it right on top of my cheekbones here. It's already adding a very nice hint of warmth onto my cheeks. Again, very sheer application of color. I love it, and I love the size of the brush head here, because it kind of cups my cheekbones quite nicely. So again, we have a very specific application of the color and the product. For contouring, maybe this might be too big, because I believe for contouring you need a very small brush head for that to be very specific with your application. But for bronzing, this brush is actually perfect. Okay, right, so let's just blend the bronzer now into the blush. Okay, it blends again the colors nicely, no muddiness at all, but I can see like the warmth of the bronzer peeking through. And of course, you can use the brush head here to apply bronzer into your hairline. And I'm gonna just be doing that and really buffing it. Now, because I have a much more bigger real estate here on my forehead, this is just like too small for the process. You actually need a bigger brush. So I'm gonna be getting the sheer buffer brush again, and I'm gonna use this here on my forehead area, just so that it minimizes the application time of the bronzer. But for sure, for this brush, you can use it here on your cheekbones and even on the sides of your nose, just to add some definition, but without like going overboard with contouring. And also here on your jawline. And you can also apply some of the bronzer here under and bring it down. Okay, so far the mini sheer buffer has worked extremely well with liquid foundations, skin tints, cream blushes, and also liquid blushes and cream bronzer. And I'm so amazed on how a small brush like this can actually do all of this. Okay, so I'm just gonna apply a little bit of concealer in my under eye, but not too much. So just here and here. Now, I'm not going to be using the mini sheer buffer for this because it's just too big to be very specific with concealer application, especially here, like in hard to reach areas. But I'm hoping though that in the future, maybe Sonia G can develop a sheer buffer brush, maybe the size of the soft concealer here, because I think like the combination and the brush head design like this can just also be very helpful in applying sheer amount of concealer, especially for someone like me who doesn't really wear full on makeup all the time, and you just really need a small amount of product. I think this should be good. Okay, and I'm gonna get a little bit of the skin tint, but not too much, just the whatever is left here on the outer portions of the palette here, and I'm just gonna again buff it into my skin. And now that I've been playing around with the mini sheer buffer, and we already know that the Fusion Face series are gonna be out of production, and I believe having the mini sheer buffer and the sheer buffer together is a perfect tandem, and maybe the only two brushes that you need if you want to apply this type of foundation application on the face, or even blush, and to a certain point concealer. So take a look into that, and take a look into your say makeup routine and your makeup products that you use on the regular, if the mini sheer buffer is actually a perfect addition into it. Because just as I'm playing with this now, I do have to say that it kind of works very similarly to the classic base here and to the mini base. But I guess the main difference is that the mini sheer buffer here in terms of size lies in between both of these brushes, especially in terms of length. But in terms of movement of the brush heads, they're actually very, very similar. And also in terms of density, of course, the classic base here is still denser in comparison to the sheer buffer. So if again you have foundations with a much more thicker consistency, with a much more thicker viscosity, the classic base should be perfect for that. So if you have that in your collection right now, keep it, treasure it, because unfortunately this is not coming back anymore. Well, so far, basing off of Sonia's blog, okay? And the final step that we're going to do is we're going to apply some powder. So let me get my translucent powder. Okay, so I'm gonna load the mini sheer buffer on my translucent powder here from Laura Mercier, and I'm just gonna tap it here in the under eye area. Don't be surprised, because ever since I've done makeup, I used to use the MAC stippling brushes, the 513, 512. Do I still have it? Hang on, let me go check it. Yeah, I still do have it. It's the MAC 137, 187. I can't remember. The number has faded over time, and this has a mix of synthetic fibers and goat hair. but as you guys can see, the bristles are just way too long. And I actually use this to apply a sheer amount of powder on the face. And I find that I can also use the mini sheer buffer for powder application. I love how small it is, and it can just really help me to be very precise with my powder application. And again, we still have that very nice sheer amount of powder applied on the face, especially here in the under eye area, just to set our concealer and to bring down shine. Fantastic. I love it. I love it. And I'm also kind of glad though that we have the mini sheer buffer now, because it kind of reminds me to a certain degree of the base one. So the main difference between these two, especially if you put it at this position, is that the diameter of the base one here is just wider than the mini sheer buffer. And of course, there's a difference in length. The mini sheer buffer is longer than the base one. But then again, because of the base one is a very stout brush head, it's actually stronger in comparison to that of the mini sheer buffer. Would you agree? And I love using the base one, so I just stopped using it over the years because if I end up breaking this, I couldn't find a replacement for it, but they're actually quite similar. Alright, so that's it for my vlog today. So I hope you guys enjoyed me showing you how I got to know the mini sheer buffer from Sonia G. So if you have any more questions about how I got to know this, or with any of the makeup products that I use today, please let me know down in the comments box and let's have a conversation about it. Alright? Okay, so that's it. If I missed out on anything, I'm gonna put it down in the comments box, or please let me know if you've seen something that you want to let me know or call out. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna let you guys go now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm hoping that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye.